Blog Talk Radio.
We're gonna have a TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight. Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV.
That's right. We've got nothing better to do than hang out here and drink a couple of brews with you tonight. This is TV Party Tonight, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, or as I'm known these days, your friend Wheezy Radulich. And this is, we are going to be reviewing Fuller House Season 2. It dropped late last year, I believe December 9th, 2016, and we just didn't have time to get to it when it initially dropped. But it's a new year with a new schedule, and I am the schedule. That's my third nickname. Your mandated reporter, Wheezy, and the schedule. I'm acquiring nicknames like Muhammad Ali. By the way, did I mention my name was Mark Radulich? Anywho's, myself and the pugilist, Pat Mullin, who I will bring on shortly, we are finally getting around to doing this as we have the time now. So let's get to it. And so here's my guest host for tonight's TV party, a man who loves his totally 80s as much as he loves his fighting, Mr. Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
I do fantastic, Mark. And just to let all of our faithful listeners know, Mark has quite a bit on his plate right now. He's really dealing with a lot of stuff outside of the podcasting realm. So it's really taken a lot for him to be here tonight. So if you doubt his enthusiasm and his willingness to entertain and trust his duties to make sure all shows go on scheduled for you guys, don't, because he's really putting a lot into this and he deserves a lot of credit.
Well, I believe it was Jack Burton who said in Big Trouble in Little China, if you're not busy living, you're busy dying. And I'm not ready to die yet, so I might as well get busy living. And I appreciate that. In all truthfulness, I have my good days, I have my bad days. Today was a good day. We'll see how tomorrow goes. More importantly, let's see how tonight goes. So I've got my earphones plugged into my cell phone. I am not internet dependent for my sound. I'm excited. Let's get to talking about Fuller House. Now, let me say right off the bat, my wife watched this before I got a chance to, and she, I think, made it 3 or 4 episodes in before she finally threw her hands up and said, I can't take this horse shit anymore, which I thought was hilarious because this kind of show was more her speed than mine. And I actually remember initially we got into a bit of an argument about it because when they initially announced the first season, she said, let's watch it together. And I said, no, I don't watch this kind of stupid crap. And then Pat said he wanted to do a podcast on it. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'll watch it then. And she was like, oh, you'll watch it for a podcast, but you won't watch it for me. So season 2 rolls around, and she was like, all right, she's finally going to sit down and watch this thing. And she said to me, she's like, yeah, I don't know what I got so excited about. This is horrible. Even I can't stomach it. And as I said online, Pat, maybe it's the oxygen deprivation talking, but I actually found this season highly entertaining. I was amused. I laughed out loud quite a few times. What was your take? Did you like this season more than the last? Do you think it improved? Do you think it fell off?
I think the first season, it was a really meticulous effort to try to not only win over viewers of Full House, but try to bring in the new audience gradually without completely alienating them in favor of just wanting to rely on the Full House fan base. So this season, it went a little more in the direction of we've got the old folks established. We need to build a little bit more on the younger cast and try to do something to create more of an audience and bring more in. And I think they did a pretty good job of it. I still wind up probably enjoying the first season a little bit more because I think this one was a little bit more ambitious on certain accounts, and we'll talk about that. And so it took some risks that maybe sometimes paid off and sometimes didn't. But we'll get there as we go. And I enjoyed this season, too. It's not a knock to say I enjoyed the first season more.
Excuse me. That's fair. You use the word ambition. And I think that speaks to one of the first things we have to talk about. And we'll get into these things episode by episode. But right off the bat, we have to discuss two things. One, where they left it last season. And where they pick up this season. And two, some of the changes they made cast-wise. First thing, they left it last season where DJ was being fought over by Matt and, what was the other boyfriend's name? Steve. And she told them both she put them both on pause and said, I need to figure out what it is that I want, and I need to get to know myself a little bit better. And then Steve and Matt ended up becoming friends, and they sort of went off together. And that's where it was left. And I think they did something else with Kimmy and her his estranged husband or whatever, where they were getting married and they didn't get married or what have you, which bleeds right into where we find ourselves at the onset of season 2, where they elevated Kimmy's estranged husband to a main cast member. Actually, his name is he plays a character named Fernando. I'm not saying his whole stupid name, but he's played. The actor is Juan Pablo DePace or DePace, or whatever you like, and he's now elevated to a main cast member. Now that's big because he was a bit player in the first season, but I feel like. And I haven't read anything about this, so I'm just taking a blind guess in the dark here, Pat. But I feel like maybe he was a favorite among people who watched the first season, and they were like, oh, we've got a hook here. He's kind of the Urkel of this show, where they didn't mean for him to catch fire, but he did, and they figured, well, let's elevate him to a main cast member because obviously he brings an audience. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's funny, too, because when we first reviewed the show, he did nothing but get on our nerves, and we really looked at him as a low point in season 1. And I do think they did a better job kind of making him a little bit more integral to the stories instead of being just kind of a one-note joke, and gave him a little more to build on. And I found him less grating, but I do think it's one of those things where it's funny, where you and I tend to not always have similar tastes when it comes to these things, but that was our one, if nothing else, universal point that we could agree on, is that we hated Fernando, and he was kind of the breakout of season 1, and they needed to expand his role in season 2.
Yeah, I definitely found him less grating. They humanized him a bit more. They made him less of a punchline and more of a character, so he was less irritating. Speaking of new characters, the other new character that they introduced, and there's a handful of recurring characters that came back. Not all of them need a long discussion, but this one does. I don't know where they got this clone of Ashton Kutcher from that they made lift weights and look beefy. They're calling him, the name they're giving him is Adam Hagenbusch as Jimmy Gibbler, but he's a hunky Ashton Kutcher clone. Don't tell me no different. I'm telling you, that guy is Ashton Kutcher with muscle. There's no way he's a real human being. My goodness.
No, I saw that guy, and, the first time I'm watching the show, I look at it and I'm like, did Ashton Kutcher, get on the gas? Like, because he is a dead ringer for, that 70s show, later years Ashton Kutcher, when he stopped really kind of feathering his hair and stuff, but he was really just kind of bulky and very muscular and wore a shirt that was about 2 sizes too small to show it off. And I was like, holy cow, who is this guy? I've never seen him in anything else. And I'm 99% convinced that they they signed him just because of the resemblance, with the added beefy factor that they'll probably hook in a large female audience with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gay, but hubba hubba. And as far as his acting career, there's not even he doesn't even light up with a link in Wikipedia. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Fuller House, and his name is just dead print. So, yeah, they just, I'm sure this was an open casting call, and that was how that went. He just walked on. They were like, can you read English? It doesn't matter. You look like this very hot, famous actor who married Demi Moore, or was dating her or whatever, and you look perfect for our female audience. Perfect. And I have to say, when they first brought him on as Jimmy Gibbler, it was, and we'll talk about the season opener in just a minute, but I want to touch on this first. I thought we had another Fernando situation on our hands. I thought, oh no, here's another dumb male, Joey from Friends kind of a situation. And then
a male bimbo?
Yeah. That's all we're going to see.
A mimbo?
Right. And it's going to be, every episode it's going to be make fun of the dumb beefy guy. And it took a few episodes, but the one where they finally go on the date and he brings her into the trailer and it turns out he's a talented photographer. That's why he lives. He's not a millennial slacker. He's He's living in the trailer because he travels and, he has to go overseas. And, yeah, he's kind of a dummy, but he's a talented dummy. And there were reasons why he was in the situation that he was in that made sense. And he wasn't always too stupid. It wasn't a situation like I said, where every joke is, look how dumb he is. So I actually liked the Jimmy Gibbler character. And I thought him and Jodie Sweetin as Stephanie Tanner actually had very good chemistry on screen. And I enjoyed, as the season progressed, I enjoyed their interactions. If you want to touch on Jimmy Gibbler, and then we'll jump into the season opener, go ahead.
Yeah, the initial reaction of some people were kind of mixed because the storyline was initially Stephanie needed time to find herself and not immediately jump into anything because of all the other relationships and such that she was in last season. And, dating Hunter Pence and thinking Harry Takayama of the old character was back and all that stuff. And so they were wanting to see more of a pursuit. But then you're just basically rehashing season one with the Fernando Kimmy hijinks, and I think that would have been a huge misstep. I think having two people who have that kind of chemistry basically just organically connect, which is, I think they did a good job within the show, was the right call to make. And it's not that they're going to get married at this point or anything like that, so it's not like they've tied that up completely. It was a good storyline for season two to give this guy some introduction and to build kind of a fan base, and I enjoyed him. There were poignant moments between them, and not all comic relief ones either, when he said to Stephanie, I envision myself having kids with you, and she has to revisit the trauma of not being able to conceive. That was really good. And he, whoever he was, if he's not a guy with any kind of prior acting experience, he pulled off the role remarkably well.
Yeah, I really had no complaints with any of the non-main characters in this. And I think overall it was a very strong season. Let me go ahead and get right into the season opener here because, like I said, there's been a break and it picks up with the thread of the story where DJ has to pick between Matt and Steve. But of course, there's a twist. The other thing is, the elevation of Fernando to main character. And then another season-long story was, Max and his project. So we'll talk about all three of those things. Right off the bat, I want to say this. I think the measure of a show like this and how good or bad it is how many times I have to fast forward through the non-organic, awkward, comedic situations. And I only had to do that 2 or 3 times the entire season, which is pretty good for me because there are certain shows I watch. New Girl, I almost have to fast forward, a portion of that show every single episode because the situations become too ridiculous. Like, no, I can't handle this. People don't act this way. I didn't have to do that too many times this season for Fuller House, but I did have to do it in the first episode. And the first episode really mimicked the very first episode of Fuller House with the transition of the old cast to the new cast, where everything felt very rushed. It felt forced. This was a rough episode to start off with. And I can see where it might give someone pause if they're coming into it cold, like, oh, my God, is the whole thing like this? And it does get better. Things do smooth out. As it did with the first season, things were slowed down. The stories were handled with care and time. But it's like I'm wondering if they'll do this with season 3 as well, where they just feel like they have so much to do that it just feels all smushed together and rushed. And then they created this situation with DJ, Jimmy Gibbler, and Steve and Matt and the girlfriends that just felt ridiculous, and I couldn't watch it. It was unbearable. So we'll start off with that part of this first. DJ's going to finally reveal who she's decided that she's going to be with, which you won't then find out at the end of this season. But the curveball that gets thrown to her is you have Matt, who is dating a young chippy, who's a big exercise freak and full of energy and doing cartwheels in the house and whatnot. And then you have Steve, who is dating CJ, not DJ. Remember that, because that's an ongoing gag throughout this season. And basically, CJ is DJ, a blonde version of DJ. Well, I don't know how she puts up with Steve. Because clearly Steve is still in love with DJ, and even she seems to acknowledge it. But go ahead. Let me give my voice a rest here. The introduction of the girlfriends and that whole swerve. What do you think of that?
Had to be done. You know, the central conflict of the second half of season 1 was DJ having to make her decision between Steve and Matt. And, it got pretty heated. If you looked at the fans actually followed the show on Twitter and everything, hashtag Team Steve Fuller House, hashtag Team Matt Fuller House, to the point where they had Kimmy, the best friend, and Stephanie, the sister, arguing over which guy was better. And, that was how the first season ended. And you're thinking, okay, second season's going to open with one of them being picked, and how's that going to translate? But instead, they were smart enough to avoid it, where they had Steve and Matt each kind of say, well, she's not dating either of us. Why are we going to sit around with our thumbs up our butt? We're not getting any younger, especially Steve. So they got girlfriends of their own. What a shock. And the one, clearly kind of the polar opposite of DJ, one very clearly a what's the word I'm looking for? Facsimile almost of DJ. And and not only did they do good in setting that up, but the conflicts between DJ and the girls, without being actual conflicts, was enough to play out over more than one episode, which is a very difficult task to attain, but they did it. I thought it was funny that they set Steve up with CJ, and I actually like the way that plays out towards the end of the season, which, we'll get there eventually. I was curious to see how the thing with Matt and his girlfriend was going to play out. And obviously, if you've seen the whole season, you know that it doesn't. But I thought that was a good way to handle it at first, because I had a sneaking suspicion it wasn't going to last. The other thing that we got to talk about is Fernando. And I think his introduction as a main cast member, on the one hand, was handled fine. On the other, it just, my God, could it have been any more forced? I mean, it didn't feel natural at all. I didn't even find it funny. I actually was, I empathized with the Max character, who, by the way, has gotten better as an actor. I don't know what, did he go to acting school over the summer, in between seasons, or
the director maybe took some notes from watching it and went back to him and said, okay, we've got to work with this kid and tone him the fuck down. But he's actually better now than he was last season, in my opinion. But yeah, and his reaction to Fernando I thought was really amusing. And I was right there with him. I was like, yeah, kid, I don't want him in the house either. But in the house he is. I mean, this house is like a magic bag of holding from Dungeons and Dragons. It just seems to go on forever and can hold an infinite amount of people. I don't know where they put all of them. Especially later in the season when like everyone comes to visit and they're doing this.
I was going to say, we'll get to
goes.
Yeah, we'll get to Thanksgiving later on.
Jesus Christ. But I was not amused by Fernando's antics in the first episode. Because I thought half of the problem with him was that he was a race car driver and he was never home. And then they introduced him as a main character and he never seemed to leave or do anything. So I was a little that irritated me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Real quick, your thoughts on Max? Do you think he got any better this second season?
Yeah, he was one of the people that really annoyed us toward the end of the first season. And it's almost like you feel bad picking on a kid, but everything with him towards that middle point of the season onward was I have to yell and be extreme, and I have to make sure everything I'm doing is where I'm in view of the camera with my arms in the air extended like I'm Donald Trump and just screaming it out to the heavens. This season was more him getting to play a different role, which is smart alecky middle child, which I think plays better to a general audience. Jodie Sweetin, when she had the same kind of adversarial relationship like that with Kimmy, ended up having a much greater reaction from people on the show in a positive way. I can think of Jonathan Taylor Thomas on Home Improvement as smart alecky middle child, and it played really well. And I think that's better here. And I think for all the stuff we could say about Fernando, it gave Elias Harder a better platform to do something different with himself, and worked out much better for him.
Yeah. He got to move beyond the I'm cute and screaming it into the camera. You know, he had a relationship to deal with. He had sort of a nemesis, and there was a different angle to him. And overall, it was much more entertaining. So here's what I got frustrated with. So they bring it. So you have one of the major threads of this season was Jodie Sweetin's Stephanie's character. You know, she settled into the house. She plays her part in raising the kids, but she's come to this realization that there's still time for her to pursue things in her own life. She doesn't just have to be, the stay-at-home aunt, as it is. She's going to focus on her music. It's something that she was passionate about. It was what she was doing prior to coming in and helping out her sister in the wake of the husband's death. So she's in the backyard, and she's messing with some chords with a acoustic guitar, and in walks hunky Jimmy Gibbler, and they have this magic moment, this unreal magic moment, which I'm fine with, honestly. For the kind of show that we're talking about here, that was about the most believable thing.
The kind of looks these people have. Come on. Okay, let's put it the opposite way, so we don't sound like we're into Jimmy Gibbler. If we were playing guitar and Jodie Sweetin walked in and had that, would you say no? Absolutely not.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. If I'm in the backyard, fiddling on a fiddle, and she walks in and gives me a come hither look and looks into my eyes, we're kissing. That's all there is to it. I absolutely understand. So, like I said, it was believable. It was the most believable thing in the entire episode. What drove me nuts and where I finally lost my patience was the third act, where Kimmy says, "Hey DJ, I feel bad that you don't have a boyfriend at your own barbecue, and the other two potential boyfriends now have girlfriends. Why don't you pretend to date Jimmy?" And they don't share this plan with Stephanie. And so you'll have to tell me what happened, because it's about that time that I went, this is horrifying. I can't handle it anymore. It's too stupid. So I'm going to let you sum up what happens here because I just hated it so much. Flames on the side of my face, and I just fast forward to the end of the episode. Go ahead.
Yeah, basically, DJ comes out and says, "Oh, I'm not really into Jimmy, and it's not working." And everyone, especially Matt, Steve, and Stephanie, are kind of not even aware of what's really going on. And Jimmy then gets to say, "Well, that's really good because I'm actually into Stephanie." And there's a little requisite of, like the rest of the background characters kind of sitting back and acting like an audience because this is getting good, which, chuckle here. But it really didn't work very well. And I myself, if I wasn't so committed to watching the whole thing, would have fast-forwarded through it.
It's hard to watch that. I would say it was one of the hardest things to get through. And thankfully not a precursor of what was to come, but more of an aberration for how the rest of the season was. Because in all honesty, most of the rest of the season was fine. There wasn't anything really about it that I was like, oh my God, this is retarded. It was actually enjoyable, and I thought the characters were relatively within the realm of believability, especially for this type of situational comedy. But that's where we end that episode. And yeah, it was a bit of a slog to get through, a bit too fast, a bit too. They were tackling a bit too much at one time, but as the season progressed, it slowed down finally, and they were able to handle, they were able to juggle the threads a bit better. One of the things that's a holdover from last season is Jackson being into Lola, and Jackson's. I wouldn't call him a shiftless layabout. He's not a kid with a particular talent for anything. He's just an average kid, which is fine. Not every kid, finds himself in middle school or elementary school. Sometimes we don't find ourselves well into adulthood. So not picking on the characterization of Jackson. But the second episode picks up the thread where he's still trying to impress Lola, so he's going to join the football team. There's a game night where Matt and Steve bring their girlfriends. And this is the episode where Alan Thicke, who may or may not have done his final performance. This is where I laughed out loud. This had to be the first episode where I was literally, I'm sitting in bed, but I'm laughing my ass off because Alan Thicke is hilarious on this. As
Mike here.
Yes. He begins every sentence with Mike here. Great. Oh my God, how much did you love Alan?
So cool. And for those that don't know, Alan Thicke, of course, star of Growing Pains and composer of a lot of music. But the neat tie-in is that as the star of Growing Pains, he played the father of DJ's real-life brother, Kirk Cameron, on that show for 7 years, on ABC, no less. So it was a nice little cute tie-in to that. And to see a familiar face who, let's face it, the majority of the Full House audience was also a pretty good semblance of the Growing Pains audience. I know I was. So it was really cool to see that tied in. And to see him playing the part of, this is, again, the disconnect between Matt's girlfriend and DJ. Matt's girlfriend is very young, very into fitness and everything. And the gag is, she brings DJ a date, and DJ goes, "Oh, is this your father?" And she goes, No, of course not. And DJ breathes a sigh of relief, and she says, "It's my grandfather."
This episode was mostly to set up how Stephanie and Jimmy actually have a connection. Like, they're doing, in the midst of playing the game, he's able to answer her questions without her really even giving them, which was a funny gag. But, it was whatever. But the whole point of it,
I actually really liked it.
Yeah, it was a elaborate setup to say, hey, Jimmy and Stephanie really do belong together, and they did it early enough in the season that there was other stuff they could do with them.
I don't necessarily think it was well written. I think it was really well performed.
Yeah. No, I think it was literally, they gave them a bit of hash to work with, and they made something out of it. That was very amusing to watch. Actually, I really thought the whole episode was funny. The interactions during the whole game night were very amusing to me and very funny. All the Alan Thicke stuff was hilarious. I laughed every time he said Mike here, and I put that on Facebook. To which you responded, Mike here. Anything about the Lola Jackson thing there? Because it was a plot thread. It was fine. I don't. The only reason why I remember it is because I'm reading it off the Wikipedia page, to be honest with you. Until Tommy gets older, they're going to have a little bit more for Jackson to do, but they have to come up with stuff that seems relatable again to a lot of kids. And I wasn't the type of kid who didn't necessarily find my niche, but I had some friends who didn't, and were always looking for something. And I can understand the angle they're painting with that, as far as the football team stuff and him being accident prone and clumsy and having the protective mom, and it's not necessarily the funniest gag, but I don't think it's meant to be. I think that's meant to keep kids interested, and when they're watching it with mom and dad who grew up on Full House and saying, wait, I understand that because that's me. Because let's face it, with every kid who tries out for a high school football team, maybe one of them actually has real talent, makes it into something more, and most of the kids who try out don't make it. So it's a relatable scenario, and I don't think it's poorly executed. I just think sometimes they try to stretch it a little bit much to keep, the involvement of the younger characters to play to the younger audience. I wasn't allowed to play football. I would play outside with my friends, and I was bigger than most kids my age, and I was very tough. I would find my place going to mosh pits and with heavy metal concerts and whatnot very early on. I started going to concerts when I was in I think 10th grade by myself with an older group of guys, and I've been doing mosh pits for a very long time, so I wasn't afraid to take a hit, and I wrestled in junior high and all of that, but my father drew the line at playing football. He thought I would be paralyzed. So from that aspect, I could relate to DJ, playing the protective mother of, saying something similar to what my father said. Like, no, it's not worth getting hurt. I don't know if he may or may not have thought I might have been talented. She flat out says, I don't think you have a talent for this. You're accident prone, and the likelihood of you getting hurt is high, and it's not worth it, especially if you're only doing this to impress a girl and your heart's not really in it. So I agree with you in that sense. If you want to give a last word, that's fine, but I want to move on to episode 3 because, and I didn't even think about this until the whole season had ended, but they didn't do a whole lot with Jackson's friend Popko, the most ridiculous name, in the first season, but he actually gets a fair amount of recurring play in this season, and I thought his little arc that they gave him was at least fairly interesting. As far as the sitcom friend role, it's usually a very annoying character. I actually found him of that genre of character to be less grating than normal, especially towards the end where he seems to have learned a lesson or so. But he starts off here with essentially manipulating Ramona into kissing him and then playing her for a fool and sending her heart on a roller coaster ride, which plays out over the season. It wasn't just a one-and-done thing, which I really liked about the writing of this season. So Popko and Ramona. Ramona's not-so-epic first kiss. Popko and Ramona. What do you think?
As far as the what I would brand the Eddie Haskell role of the show, to clarify, Eddie Haskell was the ne'er-do-well best friend of the oldest brother on Leave It to Beaver, really the first character of this kind, so that's why I call it the Eddie Haskell role, for those who didn't grow up in a house with a black and white TV and sat in front of it for hours at a time as I did. But the Popko Ramona arc is definitely something to do. I think for us, one of the surprises and bright spots of last year was Ramona and her ability to do a lot when given a little bit. And she impressed us. And this is in a way to kind of not only play that in a more, probably about as dramatic a role as you'll see on a show like this, but a very, very common thing that happens with teenage girls and teenage boys. I can say that scenario played out in my life a time or two, and Popko is definitely the butthole, not nice guy that a lot of girls seem to dig at most stages of their life. So it's well thought out on that end. And the interplay, I think, went exactly is what you would see in real life would for the most part.
I thought it was very believable. The other secondary plot of this is DJ and Stephanie crash a wedding where she picks up a gay guy. I actually thought those sequences were very funny. Stephanie with the corned beef. Oh, if I didn't love you before this episode, I certainly love you now as character. I thought that was great. Kill some of the mustard. I mean, there's a lot of one-liners and gags in this show that, I don't know, they strike me as funny. And like I said, the setup there is just trying to get DG to be less of a stick in the mud and get her to go out and live life. You know, if you're not busy living, you're busy dying, as I said earlier.
Here we go, Jack.
So, I feel like I need to repeat it, the whole other story there. But, you know, they made a point of they didn't want her to just kind of keep her down until they decided to readdress the boyfriend thing. It's like, no, let's give her some stuff to do. Let's let DJ let her hair down every once in a while because we don't want her to be too Bob Saget-y through the entire season. And so I thought it was fun. You know, letting the characters step out of character every once in a while and do something really fun makes the show itself a little bit richer, in my opinion. And I thought the crashing of the Irish wedding was hilarious.
A little hackney because, you know, somebody like me or you will get the jokes of who Sinead O'Connor and Carol O'Connor are. I feel like the majority of the audience may get the Sinead joke, but will not understand the Carol O'Connor joke, as Carol O'Connor is very famous for playing Archie Bunker, among other iconic roles, but that's the one. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google a TV show called All in the Family. You know, so to me and you, that's funny, but that plays to a very niche audience. But the overall gag of it, of them step dancing and not knowing the words to Danny Boy and bringing a gift to the wedding they were crashing, that was all really good. And you have to have those episodes where it can get goofy, but reasonably goofy. It reminded me of their girls' night out in season 1 when they were doing the dance contest.
Right. Yeah, I think there's limitations. I actually think later on when they go to the high school reunion, they overstep that line quite a bit. But I thought this, you know, keeping it light, making some fun references and some jokes, and keeping to some of the themes, it's fine. Episode 4 is the Halloween episode. This got to me, and it ended well. This was one of those where I was thinking about fast forwarding it at one point because it was getting ridiculous. And basically the premise here is DJ throws a terrible Halloween party to try to impress Max's friends. But of course she's a goody-goody mom, and she doesn't understand that, 10 is the new 20. So she's got this one kid there, and he's a reoccurring character, especially when they bring the father in. That's like highly competitive, and it's one of those where everything they do is, ridiculously good and it's compared to everybody else. And so this kid is just ripping this party to shreds, and it actually ends with Stephanie and Jimmy, who are working as zombies in a haunted house, bringing all the haunted house characters back and scaring the shit out of the kids. Yeah, okay, it's fine. I didn't love it, but I didn't love the episode, but I thought the ending was fine. As far as the subplot,
I was going to say, there's one particular part of this episode I really loved, and I was shocked by it because it involved Fernando.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I grew up on I Love Lucy reruns. I don't think it's uncommon that anybody listening has seen at least one I Love Lucy rerun. So the costumes as a whole were fun when they started. to actually go full blast into the Lucy-Ricky hijinks where Fernando says he's going to perform for the kids as Ricky and perform his signature song Babalu with a conga was fantastic. And Kimmy, again, Andrea Barber was the highlight of last season for me. And she gets to play that part again and do a little homage to Lucille Ball. And between her trying to sneak into the performance, the facial expressions, everything about what she did was magic. And Fernando did not weigh her down at all. He held up his end for once and was actually funny. And their little end song together in black and white was really engaging.
Okay. It didn't. From a craft point of view, I don't disagree. And, you know, we haven't talked a lot about Andrea Barber yet in this season, but you're absolutely right. She continues to be a real pip. The actress herself continues to bring a lot to that character and make her interesting. She lights up as a performer. I did find the Lucy and Ricky bit to be amusing and entertaining, but overall, I didn't take to it quite like you did, to be honest. I just thought, like, okay, I get it, and they're doing a great job, but I thought it was a gag that in and of itself was fine, but it just felt like the rest of the episode wasn't good enough to where I could look at that and go, you know, like, oh, it's all great. You know, it was more like, this episode is blah, and that's kind of funny, and I just want to go on to the next episode.
I don't disagree, because that was mainly the one part of the show, the episode, I should say, that stuck out to me in a very positive way, other than Max's friend Taylor, like, subtly hitting on DJ.
All right, so we get to episode 5, which is basically a long setup to finally moving on with the DJ and the revolving boyfriend storyline. Spoiler alert, she goes with Team Max. Basically, the dog swallows a corn cob, and we should point out at this point that in the first episode, Max has his project that he has to do. He has to do something having to do with making the world a better place. So he decides he's going to create a sustainable garden. And Fernando, I think, buys some chickens, which they name after characters from the original season. I think it's Joey, Jesse, Danny and Becky. Rebecca. Yeah, Chicken Becky. Actually, the gags with the chickens I find amusing now that I'm thinking about it. But so we've got chickens. He's growing vegetables. And this is something that, like, him and Fernando kind of bond over. Well, at one point, not knowing better, going back to this episode, he gives him an ear of corn. Dog swallows the corn. The dog now needs surgery. Matt ends up helping DJ do surgery on the dog. And in doing so, they realize they want to be together. And Matt ends up breaking up with Crystal and starts dating DJ. Perfect. It was a perfect setup, perfect execution. Yay. I don't remember where we landed last season, but I remember being Team Matt, so I was happy that this is the direction they went in. I actually think as a couple, an on-screen couple, they look good together. So I was happy for it. I thought this was an excellent episode. The other side of the episode, the other plot thread was Ramona doing an audition for a dance coach. And, you know, they bring in a lot of very flamboyant characters on this show. And the dance coach was certainly there. And I tell you, this is, again, one of those situations where, thankfully, there was some restraint on either the director's side or the actor's side, or both. Either way.
Well, he's not an actor. That is Bruno Tognoli from Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, is it? Okay, I had no idea who he was. I don't watch Dancing with the Stars. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's Bruno Tognoli from Dancing with the Stars, who's known to be very bombastic with his explanations of his scores, and he's also the very critical judge who tends to never give out tens, which they allude to with the joke he makes towards the end of the episode. Okay. So I was actually impressed with what he was able to do, because yes, there's a little bit of actual Bruno in there, but whether it was good writing to structure his guest appearance around what they believe him to be capable of, or whether he just went through with what he did, good on Bruno, because I was surprised. And again, not really surprised to see at least one Dancing with the Stars feature there, because we've had Candace Cameron do it, and then 2 seasons ago we had Jodie Sweetin do it. So
I enjoyed that subplot with Ramona and the dance coach. Whatever the approach was, okay, I get that's how he is, and that's fine and everything. That's his TV persona. Thankfully, then they didn't play too much of that up. I thought there was enough restraint involved that it was a watchable character. I was happy that they wrote it where Ramona actually succeeded. I was also happy they wrote it where this was one of those situations where they could have chose to make it really silly and have the Kimmy and Ramon character ruin things for her in a ridiculous way that people don't actually act like. But they didn't go in that direction, thankfully. There was, again, restraint shown in the writing, and they actually, they allude to them being somewhat embarrassing for her and overwhelming for her, and then when she needs them, Ramon, who we all hate, rises to the occasion and really shows these moments where he can be a good, thoughtful father. He's doing what he's doing. He has a talent, obviously, for dancing, and he's able to do that to help his daughter. And there was some, and in a father-daughter way, obviously not in a romantic way, there was some on-screen chemistry between those two characters, and I really enjoyed that subplot.
Yeah, he doesn't play a lot of roles well, but at least in the role of father, which maybe he is a father in real life, and that's where he does get it from. I don't know. I don't know Juan Pablo's background all that much. But the point of him being a really supportive, wanting everything to be the best for Ramona's father is not something that was lost on me in the first season, particularly when she had her birthday party. And going into this season, not only with this episode, but in the episode we talked about where she has her first kiss and first, what she thinks is a date with Popko and his attitude towards Popko. It's one role he can play consistently pretty competently.
Yeah. And again, later on they do some stuff with Kimmy that annoyed me, namely the Nutcracker bit, where they just write her in a way where she periodically loses her mind. And it gets to be a little much for me. But here they showed some restraint, and it worked. It all worked very, very well. So speaking of not showing restraint, holy shit, episode 6, Fuller Thanksgiving, and the Magic House of Holding, with the 72 people in it that they suddenly had room for. You had, when I mentioned it earlier, you were like, oh God, we got to talk about this. Are you like, the house seemed full with just the main cast. What the hell, man?
This was insane. They always, on the original show, there were always times where you had a lot of people staying in the house at once. Never this much. At one point in time in the house, you had residency taken up by Danny, the 3 girls, Jesse, Rebecca, and their 2 boys, and Joey. And that accounts for 8 people. Not a tremendous amount for a 3-story house, but now you're factoring in, everybody except for Michelle of the original cast, Kimmy, Fernando, Ramona, the 3 boys, Joey, his wife, and their, I believe it was 4 children.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I think it was 4. Yeah.
Yes, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Matt being invited over for the dinner, Steve and CJ being invited over for the dinner. It was an insane amount of people in one place at one time trying to arrange it. And then on top of that, you have poor Jesse being kicked out of the bedroom by Becky because they disagree over child adoption, which we'll get to too.
Yeah, that was overwhelming to watch. I could imagine directing all those actors. I think we need to address something right off the bat. Joey and his wife and those 4 horrible children. Because it was one of those situations where I'm watching this and I'm like, first of all, when did this happen? I don't remember him having. I barely remember his origin, where I guess he had a wife, and they separated, or whatever, and that's how he ended up as being a friend to Danny, moving into the house.
No.
That's not what happened.
He just happened to be Danny's best friend, and when Danny became a widower, he asked not only Jesse for help, but he asked Joey if he would help, and told him he could move in, and so Joey moves in because he doesn't have to pay rent and doesn't have a real job at the time.
Okay. When did this happen? Because they alluded to her being his second wife. What have I missed?
I don't remember the allusion to being a second wife, honestly, from the first season. But in the first season, actors, they do little things. And one of the things I noticed on him during the first season was he wore a wedding band through each episode he was in. And it's pretty noticeable because it's a black wedding band. It's, onyx or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't your standard, gold wedding band that could easily blend in and not be picked up. And I know they allude to him living in Vegas and whatever, but they never really went full bore on how he met his wife, where they met his wife, that he had children in the first place. And it kind of raises some questions about last season when he was randomly able to fly in from Vegas to babysit when they had girls' night out. What did you do? Did you leave your whole family behind? That sort of deal.
Right.
Yeah. And I know it was the needed gag for this. I just wish there was some background to it, because we don't know anything about the children, for example, being horrible until they start doing extremely horrible things right off the bat.
Yeah, I feel like the writing of this was very lazy, where it was like, we want a situation where there's these horrible – the gag is the kids are these kids are horrible, but there's nothing anyone can do about it. And I'm like, okay. But it just came out of nowhere, and you're telling me that nobody in this house recognizes how bad these kids are, or this. I mean, I know they send Kimmy to sort of deal with him, which goes, of course, awry because she's an idiot too. But the whole thing seemed very hackneyed to me, and I thought I almost found it just too distractingly stupid. This episode.
But and little stuff about it too, like how did two boys who look to be about we'll generously call them 8 and 9 years old, how were they able to tie up Jackson? I know he's an accident-prone kid, but he's twice their size. Just wring his neck.
I kept waiting. I was like, how did you not punch either of those two kids? You're telling me these two little you just laid down and let these two kids tie you up? I mean, that got too stupid, And Ramona, who's kind of a badass in her own right, just let the two girls go through her stuff and look like Jerome from Gotham. I know you watch the show, but I mean, it was just like, maybe it's just me and you, who would never let something like that happen, even when we were that age. But it just looked too stupid to me. And I felt like that as a parent, and as somebody who works in the mental health profession, I'm watching this going, if you're Joey, how do you let this happen? And then they gave the mom nothing to do.
And there's the point I wanted to go to. Joey's always been an idiot of a character, like really pronounced in the later years of Full House too, where there's one particular instance where they're talking about how it's a problem that Becky can't sing because they sing a harmony to Nikki and Alex every night. And Jesse really thinks it's a huge problem. And I'll never forget this line because it just makes me so angry. Joey goes, that's not a big problem. A big problem would be like if your butt fell off. And I feel like that was the height of his character's stupidity. Mm-hmm. And like there was a point in time where Jesse just really didn't tolerate it and would smack him all the time. But even he couldn't smack him to that. His reaction was probably like a really natural John Stamos reaction. He just goes, "What?" And then he gives a really stupid explanation of how you'd be totally out of the mooning business. And so I could maybe buy that he's enough of an idiot to not see this. And then you really have to stretch your TV logic here to think, well, there's a woman who married this man and procreated with him multiple times. She can't be all that bright.
Right.
So maybe that's your explanation?
Or the other side of it is those are his stepchildren. Which, okay, fine, but either way, why even, I mean, as a writer on this show, why even have the mother character there if you're not going to give her anything to do?
And here's what I'm getting to, because the actress who plays Ginger Gladstone, Laura Bell Bundy, she was a recurring character on a show I really loved called Heart of Dixie. She played the role of Shelby in that show and was a recurring love interest for Tim Matheson's character. She is really good at comedy. Really good. And to have her in this and not use her, I thought was such a misstep. And part of the problem, though, is what we're talking about. We're not just the house is overcrowded, but you as a writer have the challenge of trying to find something for everybody to do in this. And it's just too much in one episode.
Yeah, they really tried to juggle too much. And so let's talk about, I'm saving the best for last, but let's talk about Bob Saget for a second. Because what I found amusing about his subplot was I identified with the midlife crisis thing. I knew exactly when he walked in, he was like, "What up, home slice?" He's doing that awkward white boy thing, which I found amusing because all I could think about was his stand-up once Full House ended. Like Bob Saget apparently had this persona prior to Full House, and then he was known as Danny. Danny. Oh God, what the hell was their last name? Shit. What's his name? His character's name?
Danny Tanner.
Thank you, Danny. So then he was Danny Tanner. He was like America's Dad there for a while, and then and then alongside of that, he was the host of America's Funniest Home Videos. So Bob Saget really had to clean himself up and present this goody-goody image to all of America for a long time. And so when it was all over and he could go back to not having to put out an image, do you remember that stand-up that he did on HBO that shocked the shit out of everybody? Where they were like, oh, my God,
oh man,
has a dirty mouth. Yeah,
that came out in '97, and I obviously I had grown up watching Full House, and I heard he did, I think it's called That Ain't Right, if I'm not mistaken,
right.
That special. And I wanted to watch it because I'm like, it's Danny Tanner. Well, my dad had made this mistake once before by letting me watch a Pee Wee Herman special on HBO that was not at all like Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Nope.
So he, for once, acted like a responsible parent and kind of pre-screened it and said, absolutely not. And this is a guy who would let me watch Dice Clay before. So
sure.
That kind of tells you where that stand-up was at.
I was going to say, he makes Dice Clay seem like Bill Cosby, minus the raping. So anywho, so yeah, it was funny to see him as much as he could for a show like this dig into that persona. So I was amused by it, but it was something they could have cut to give the Joey thing a little bit more time, and make it a little less hackneyed and rushed. Because the other big thing in this episode, aside from DJ's kind of meltdown because Thanksgiving is gone awry, which, believe me, as the schedule, I can sympathize with TJ. I understand where she's coming from. I got your back on this one, sister. But the subplot with Joey and Rebecca, where she has baby fever, and clearly she's too old to have to give birth to a child, but you're never too old to adopt, kind of a thing. And then you have Joey, who's like, we've done our bit for God and country.
Jesse.
Jesse. I've done the bit. I helped raise the girls. We've raised our 2 children. Enough's enough. I just want to live my life. Which, as a man, who has 2 children of his own, I sympathize with that point of view. I'm nowhere near that point. But, when my kids turn, 18, 19, 20, and they are off doing their own thing and out of the house, I can't imagine a world where I would want to go back and do it all over again with anyone's children. My own biological or an adopted child. But there are some people that do. My wife's cousins raised, 2 children who are either adults or approaching adulthood, and they've just fostered a child who I think they're going to try to adopt. And it's like, all right, whatever makes you happy, but that is a believable argument and discussion with a lot of emotion tied to it, and I can see both sides, and there was a lot of grist for the mill there, and I really did like how it was handled. It's just, it was one of those where I could totally see where Jesse was coming from, and I was kind of rooting for him. I was like, I get it, man. I totally see it, but not the direction that they went in. So, but overall, I found that, at the very least, it was one of those non-funny, entertaining moments of that kind of a sitcom.
Yeah, and you're dealing with probably, in terms of actual acting ability, the two strongest links on the show in Stamos and, forgive me, Lori Loughlin. Yeah, they're probably your two best actual actors on that show. So if you're going to do that with somebody, it makes the most sense to do with them. They're also, at least definitely in the case of Stamos, really the fan favorite character. So people want to see them in a situation they can invest in rather than a one-off type of appearance.
Agreed. Anything else about this before we move on?
No, I think it was kind of just a really big mess, as much for DJ as it was for the viewer.
Yeah. Excuse me. Episode 7. We go from huge and out of control to a very small episode here with Girl Talk. We're back to Stephanie and her music. She writes the song, and there's an idea of, hey, you need a band to back you up singing it. They decide they're going to reunite Girl Talk, and DJ will play the drums. They bring in a character, I guess, from the original series, Gia, who was a bad influence on Stephanie.
Yes, and played by her actual original series actress, Marla Sokoloff.
Oh, that's awesome. They really did a good job of bringing back original cast members from the first season, which I find very amusing. In any case, they do a couple of renditions of the Sign from Ace of Base, and the whole gimmick with the thing is, other than DJ is miraculously able to play drums because he was good at Rock Band, which as a gimmick, as a modern gimmick, played for laughs in various types of situations, I always find very funny. I'm able to play a real life instrument because I was good at this video game. Okay, terrific. But the major conflict is that even though they have become moms and adults and they have progressed in life, there's still this underlying conflict of, you're a bad influence on my sister, well, you're a goody-goody, and things don't work out. And it all bubbles up once again in this band. So this band lasts about an hour, basically, which again I found amusing. Any thoughts on Girl Talk?
Good episode because it was fun for people who watched the original show to see Marla Sokoloff actually show up as Gia, still technically a bad influence on Stephanie, and it gave enough to the older viewer where the viewer invested in the children, had a pretty decent storyline underneath it that tied in. You talk about how it's a modern gag to, do the Rock Band gimmick where I can play drums on Rock Band, I can play, this gimmicky thing in real life, where a kid uses social media to humiliate another kid, which I thought was pretty relevant based on everything we see in the news today.
Yeah, I've talked about this any number of times, and I don't want to get into it again tonight. But I have said on a number of occasions, the scariest thing in the world for me right now is when my daughter, especially, but, even my son, are going to go to school and, God forbid, they are bullied. It won't just end at school, where they can go home and at least be free for a few hours. Now with the internet, a kid can just as easily bully you all day and all night, create a blog about you, a podcast, share pictures of you. I mean, social media being what it is, they can do exactly what they did in this episode. Create something humiliating, share it with millions, and you never get a break from it. It's a nightmare, and there's nothing really you can do about it. I hope to God my kids don't have to go through that, but, you know, even I'll say this one thing. When my daughter decided that, because of my influence, she wanted to do a toy video to be put up on YouTube, where she watches these unboxing videos and she watches videos of kids playing with toys. So she wanted to do one of her own, and I have the raw footage still saved in my computer. I haven't cut it up yet, but I was telling my wife what I intended to do. I was going to cut it up and put it on YouTube and actually make her own YouTube account connected to my email. And she was like, and initially she disagreed with that idea. And my wife goes, "Could we spare your almost 6-year-old daughter?" This was in December. "Can we spare your almost 6-year-old daughter the humiliation of YouTube comments?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I'll disable the comments. It'll be fine." But I mean, you can absolutely envision someone looking at a 6-year-old telling you about her dolls and horrible comments,
saying what a stupid kid.
About it. Yeah, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're fat, your toys are dumb, whatever. You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, that's the kind of world we live in, where I have to think about that. And something as innocent as my daughter wanting to talk about her dolls on a video. So, yes, a very relevant and biting and very emotional subplot in this episode with Ramona and Popko. All right. Episode 8, as we start winding down here. This is a tangled web. Yes, this is speaking of YouTube. Here's where we get a rendition of The Boy Next Door, which is as far as pop songs go, it's a cute song. Real quick, you may voice a rest here. What did you think of The Boy Next Door?
Relatively harmless, nice bubblegum pop, which is refreshing for a lack of auto-tune, if nothing else. Nothing that is going to offend me to listen to. Nothing that is obviously bad. It's not gonna be the Let It Bleed album from the Stones in terms of impact or relevance, but it's a nice little friendly pop song that's just fine.
Yeah. And it's our outro music tonight, as a matter of fact. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It was whether you like pop or don't like pop, it's a catchy song. I still have it in my head. So as I'm driving around town, listening to the new Creator or my workout mix, which is full of heavy metal, I'll still have in the back of my mind The Boy Next Door. Hey, he's the boy next door. And so we see more of Jimmy's creative side coming out, where he creates a music video, and it's like over the top lovey-dovey, over the top maudlin. Well, not maudlin, but just as Kimmy puts it, they are annoying. So they changed the video to where it's about the baby and the dog, and of course it gets a bazillion hits, and everyone loves it, which leads to other stuff in the next couple of episodes related to her music career. But I thought that was amusing. This is also the end of the subplot for Max's Garden, which becomes a competition between him and the best friend Taylor. Taylor builds like a solar powered ATV, and so DJ, who becomes very competitive, turns Max's Garden into a lot of sizzle, an over-the-top show, which I actually thought was brilliant. I have to say, in terms of like self-referential mocking, and I don't even know if they realized they did that, the writers, but they absolutely drew a parallel with Max's Garden show to the idea that you can trick a lot of people into going along with something by making it super entertaining and light, high on entertainment value, light on knowledge, light on fact. And I'm almost wondering, now that I say that out loud, if the writers were thinking about the election and Donald Trump and how he was able to garner support among a lot of disaffected middle working class people by being high on sizzle and low on actual fact. Thankfully, they didn't direct. If that's what was guiding the writing of this plot, thankfully they didn't reference it directly.
Yeah, it was a pretty clear painting of what they were trying to do, as well as the fact that, spoiler alert, neither Taylor or Max win, and a third party wins and makes everyone happy. Which we'll leave that alone too. But that was, at least it wrapped things up in a way where I think it gave the closure it needed to that particular storyline. It gave a lot of space for Elias Harger to do things that weren't his normal season one, I'm going to yell and get super excited route type of acting. It allowed a different character dimension to DJ, where she becomes super competitive mama bear and doesn't want her kid falling behind anybody. And even Fernando, you see, start to build a bond here with Max and kind of become more a part of the actual Fuller House family as opposed to just an extension of Kimmy's family.
Yeah, I really liked Elias Harder in this episode. You're absolutely right. First of all, he hasn't spent most of the season shouting into the camera, or doing that precocious "I'm cute" bit. But this one, they gave him, they needed him to kind of step out and be a bombastic performer, and it played well this time around. I like the father character. Again, restraint was shown. They didn't make him too over the top either. Thank God. There's really nothing to talk about with the third subplot, which is watching Lola's spider, which then causes havoc. So we'll move on to episode 9 here. Glazed and Confused. So this is the one with the poison donuts that Joey brings.
Yes.
That makes everybody in the house sick. So we have that. So we have that subplot, which is basically it was one of those gags that makes Matt bond with the family, and kind of shows DJ that. Go ahead. Forgot one note I had written down for A Tangled Web.
The director of A Tangled Web is Joanna Kearns. If the name sounds familiar, we made an allusion to the series Growing Pains earlier. Joanna Kearns played Alan Thicke's wife, Maggie Seaver, on that particular show, also parent to Kirk Cameron's character, the brother of Candace Cameron.
Yes, I actually knew that name. Didn't connect until you said it, but I remember Joanna Kearns was an actress, and now apparently a director. All right. The major plot thread of Glazed and Confused was Stephanie goes to Los Angeles to be on her dad's show to perform The Boy Next Door with her new band, which is a bunch of nobodies. And while they're there, Jesse's around because they're being followed by a adoption specialist who's doing a pre-adopting interview and analysis of them to see if they'd be good adoptive parents. Fernando goes because he wants to see the set to his favorite show, Policewoman, and in all the nonsense that happened, they all get trapped in they think they are trapped in the cell that is part of the set for Policewoman, and meanwhile, and I actually thought this was very funny. They decide that Danny can't have the show by himself. He needs someone to interact with. And so this is where you get to see Andrea Barber probably do her best work all season as his sub-in co-host. And this is a part of her character is she's pushy. She's not afraid to be in the spotlight, obviously. And so she takes the opportunity to be his co-host and just takes over every segment. In this situation, it worked and it was funny. A couple episodes from now, when she does it in Ramona's play, I don't think it's as funny. It actually is very annoying. But here, making Danny sort of the straight man who's just, whose every reaction is to just sigh into the camera. I actually had I had a good time with this episode. I thought it was amusing. And then the bit where they finally get out of the cell because Jesse leans on the wall and it just comes apart. And he walks out and they're like, oh, hey, how'd that happen? And they all leave Stephanie stranded on top of the cell. I thought that was cute, too.
Yeah, I like this episode. This is kind of the opposite of the Thanksgiving episode in that you had so much going on with so many characters that nothing really was all that great other than a little bit of Bob Saget being Bob Saget. But in this one, you still had a lot going on, multiple, many more subplots than usual, a lot more characters to juggle than usual, but they made it work. They found niches for everybody to get into, and I enjoyed it. Again, no surprise, particularly Barber, turning up the Goofy to 11 in a fun way when having to interact as Danny's co-host on the show. Even being stuck in the fake jail cell from Policewoman, again, it's a point where Fernando can really start to annoy me, but I think pairing him with Stamos in that end made him tone it down enough, and John could kind of take control of the scenes, almost like a wrestling match where, not to derail us, but you have a guy who has athletic ability but doesn't know how to tell a story, put in with a veteran who knows when to do certain things at what time and when to cut off things when they get too out of hand, and that's kind of what John Stamos played in that scene, and I don't think that's necessarily transparent to a viewer who's not a wrestling fan.
Yeah, I thought Stamos and Wanda Pace actually were a nice balance for each other. No one outshined anybody. Everyone brought balance to the episode. And you're right, all the balls were appropriately juggled, without dropping any of them. And I thought it was a bit, I would say this. Season 2 has a balance issue where some of the episodes are very unbalanced and lose focus and there's just too much going on, while other episodes are very perfectly balanced. And overall, it creates a very mixed presentation for the entire season. Then this was one of the better episodes. This next one, however, episode 10, New Kids in the House, where the whole premise of this episode is DJ's birthday, where, they're trying to get her to this New Kids on the Block concert. Turns out they bought fake tickets for it. So they're trying to get the New Kids on the Block to the house to go sing her happy birthday. Meanwhile, she's doped up from having to have dental surgery. And then there's a subplot about, birthday gifts. And, of course, Fernando gives her a birthday gift of a painting of himself, which is very in line with that character, and I thought that was actually pretty funny. I don't know. I know this is the kind of thing that a lot of sitcoms do to bring guests on. They create these ridiculously amazing situations. But let's face it, if you try to kidnap a band, you will go to prison. It doesn't end well. And yeah, they were good sports about it. And yes, it's just a fun sitcom. Don't take it so seriously. But I struggled with this. I have to be honest.
It took the zany factor out of the realm of fun and into, well, this is just Goofy for the sake of Goofy.
Yeah.
And you brought up the point, like, yes, a lot of this audience is going to be the audience that loves New Kids on the Block. Guilty. Yeah, I said it. But at the same time, it's waiting for my cover girl. Just have to take it step by step. All right, that's enough of that. But this was, the premise was they wanted to get the New Kids on the Block to first to the concert, then to try to get a personalized happy birthday to her, almost mirroring again what they did in the first show early on in an episode with the Beach Boys. And in this one, it just went too far and too broad to really revolve the show around the New Kids on the Block, and they probably could have played up the DJ being completely out of it stuff more. I feel like Candace Cameron is more than capable of playing, funny kind of doped up patient role. The birthday gift premise was cute. It wasn't something that was necessary or crazy or anything like that, and it was a nice little throwback to the first season when Steve wound up getting her a pillow person, which I think most girls from the 1980s and early 90s had in their bedrooms, at least in my experience. No further commentary needed there. But this was an episode that really, it's almost like, well, we've done a lot of serious good, now let's take a time out and just let things ride. And this kind of felt like that, where it was really a one gag type of show, where everything was centered on what's going to happen with New Kids on the Block. And so in that vein, you can kind of take it or leave it.
Episode 11, DJ and Kimmy's high school reunion. I really hated this episode. It's just, I understand what the point of it was. This was sort of the last hurrah for DJ and Steve. This is a setup to the season finale, and and how Steve is going to propose to CJ and all that. This was the closing of the book on that relationship and all, which I got, but so much of it was beating up on Kimmy. It just bothered me. I didn't like the approach to it. Again, I thought the stuff with DJ and Steve was fine, but the stuff with Kimmy took me out of the episode. I thought it was too much, and I don't like that kind of writing where let's have adults act indecent to one another and treat another adult like shit. It's just, of course, everything this is a professional party planner who can't get through this entire party without making a series of mistakes, including, airing something about a UTI, through the speakers and whatnot. It was just like, come on, you had a great character here, and you've now made her seem like the most incompetent woman on earth, And then, of course, the stuff with Ramon, I was like, this was one I had to fast forward through.
Yeah, I had a tough time with this one. The name obviously a reference to Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, which is a movie I absolutely love. Don't know if you've ever seen it or how you feel about it. This was like the anti-Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, where it was, in that series it was developed, in that movie I should say, it was developed why those characters were coming back as, kind of punching bags for some of the other characters, and there was happy resolution and things like that. This was just kind of, there wasn't anything in here of gravity or weight, and in terms of the main plot at least, where, you kind of had Steve getting to be a good guy at the end of it, and then play the game a little bit where he tells DJ he's going to propose to CJ and he kind of wants her help with it, where she kind of has that moment of maybe, should I have picked Steve? What am I doing? Do I really like Matt as much as I think I do? To me, the better stuff was Jackson faking the report card, because, we talked a lot about the acting that Elias Harder got to do in this, a lot about what Ramona got to do, Sonny Nicole Brangus in this. We talked about one episode where Jackson really had something to do. So this episode was a point where he felt like he needed a straight A report card in order to stand out in his family. And that's not necessarily a bad motivation, because you've got so much going on with so many characters, and he's really had the least other than the baby Tommy. So I think it was good from a writing standpoint if you're logically following the narrative of the show. And I think it's, again, we talked about how he's a guy who's struggling to find himself. Not a bad thing to explore in one term, that might be another way for him to go.
No, I actually thought this paid off the football storyline very nicely. This idea of, as you said, I don't have a niche. I don't feel like I have an identity outside of I'm your brother and your son and your nephew. And it gets frustrating that there's nothing that makes me special. So, he has to artificially create something, and he really had sort of a breakdown with Stephanie about it. I thought it was great. I actually thought the kid who plays Jackson did a good job of selling the angst that he has about being ordinary in his extraordinary family. It was the only part of the episode I actually liked. The rest of it was shit.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, I very much enjoyed Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. I thought it was great. I still remember I can't remember the actress's name, but her telling Janine Garofalo that she invented stickies and
Post-it notes,
like,
yeah.
No. Post-it notes, right? She's like, no, I know that guy. You did nothing. That's great. All right. Speaking of episodes I couldn't stand, episode 12, Nutcrackers. We have a thing where Lola is upset that Ramona can't go to her party, so she goes to the party thinking they'll give me enough time to get to the play before the second act where I show up. Of course, they get lost. The sitcom stuff always happens. They get lost. They don't make it in time. So somebody has to fill in for Ramona. And everything that made Kimmy fun in Glazed and Confused is everything that makes this episode almost unbearable to watch. Because instead of, if they had just kept it to, I'm trying to protect my daughter's spot, but, and save this performance for my daughter, if they had kept it to that, and the jokes where she doesn't know what she's doing, so she's just sort of, I thought up to the point where Ramona showed up, I actually was amused by it. She has everybody doing the Gibbler gallop, and the explanation is, well, everyone gallops, And I thought that was rather amusing. But once Ramona showed up and she didn't get off the stage and she then again made it about her instead, I was like, when does this ever stop with this character? When is it never about Kimmy? And it's just the degree of selfishness in her character that they write to the point where it harms the daughter isn't very amusing for me to watch.
No, obviously you're going to relate to it on a level where you're a parent and you can't imagine doing that type of thing to your child. I don't necessarily think you have to be a parent to even consider that type of reaction. But, here's the problem with how good Andrea Barber is. They see how well she can do certain things to me, and they decide, well, we need to expand on it and do more of that. No, you don't, because at that point, you turn what makes the character fun and special, as you pointed out in Glazed and Confused, into something stepping way over the line of good taste and good writing just for visual gags. And it doesn't work.
As I said, they turned her into the actress of the one that everyone hated from Ghostbusters. What the hell's her name?
Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah, they turned her into Melissa McCarthy. Where Melissa McCarthy, say what you will, but she's a talented actress and she is actually very funny. She's Rosie O'Donnell back in the day before she became horrible was actually very funny. But it's like Hollywood just has this thing where they find these actresses that are very good with physical comedy, and then they just stop giving them anything to work with other than falling down. Just fall down and be stupid. And they've done it to Michelle McCarthy, and it isn't just about being fat because Andrea Barber's not a fat actress, but that it tends to happen more often than not with fat actresses. But they've done this with quite a few, where it's like they're funny in all kinds of ways. They just happen to also be able to do physical comedy, and then they get pigeonholed into just doing physical comedy. And I feel like that's what they're doing with Andrea Barber, where it's like, we know that you're this bombastic personality and you can do all this physical stuff, so we'll only have you do that, and we keep upping the ante, as you said, because we figure, the bigger the nonsense, the more the less. And it's like, nope, this can only go. It's like it's like a meter. As the needle goes into the red, it's no longer funny. And this went into the red. This went so far into the red, it went off the charts for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a waste of what Andrea Barber can do. And she's, again, as you said, she's more than just physical comedy. She has great delivery, great timing, plays her part extremely well. but they just get lazy and decide we're going to go the slapstick route. This is a visual medium and everything needs to be visual at this point. So we're going to turn her into, female John Ritter and falling all over the place and bumping around and looking silly.
Thankfully, this episode is actually saved by two elements of it that I thought were sweet. You have, they finally, and I'm going to reference something from, I don't know if you're familiar with Red Letter Media, but this is the Mr. Plinkett Star Wars reviews. This is Half in the Bag. They do a number of other things, but that's what they're primarily known for. And if you know nothing else about the Red Letter Media guys, the thing that made them famous was the Mr. Plinkett review, the 12-part review of the Phantom Menace, which if you haven't seen it, you really should. It's excellent. But on their show Half in the Bag, they have something called the Not Gays. So, for example, Chris Pine's Captain Kirk, the writers made sure he had a case of the Not Gays by showing scenes where he's having sex with aliens. Like, Spock has a case of the Not Gays because they have to show him kissing Uhura. I mean, he has to be in a relationship just so everyone knows he's not gay. So when I say, and it's weird they did it with a little kid, but it was like the way Elias Harder had portrayed Max played him a little feminine. We talked about that in the first season. Not only was he screaming into the camera half the time, but he also played him very feminine for some odd reason. And even though they toned him down in this season, he's still playing the character a bit Stewie-ish. He's writing that line where you're like, gay? Get a little bigger? Which, whatever. I mean, it's weird that you would do that with a kid, but it's also very noticeable. And then it was like as if they had a tacit recognition that, oh no, we've made this child a little fagula. They're like, quick, he has to have a case of the not gays. So they gave him a girlfriend. And it was like they somehow managed to make it forced and sweet at the same time. I was actually amused by their chemistry. As much chemistry as you can have with little kids. But it was also like you could definitely see someone they got notes from a producer or something. They were like, "You've made the kid too gay. Give him a girlfriend." Oh God, okay, here. We'll say fucking Steve and CJ have a daughter already. A stepdaughter in Steve's case, and that'll be Max's girlfriend. You happy now? Whatever. But real quick, Max and Rose.
Just a fun little half a love story that these sitcoms tend to throw in every now and then. It's a cutesy little thing. They tried it on Girl Meets World with the two younger children in that show, the son Augie and a girl who lives in the building. Didn't have any real chemistry there. It was just kind of forced. This I thought was a little more fun, a little more lighthearted, and I thought it played well with the dynamic of the older kids to boot.
And then, of course, this is the episode where Jimmy Gibbler tells Stephanie that he loves her, and after a time, she tells him she loves him back, and then they are a couple, and it's all wonderful. And finally, as we come to the end of this podcast, so too we come to the end of this season with Happy New Year, baby. The gang is all here once again for New Year's. This whole episode, Stephanie is waiting for Max to come back from India. Everyone's in town. They're going to get the new baby. Jesse and Rebecca are going to get their adoptive baby on New Year's. Stephanie tells Jimmy that she's infertile, which, that's fine. He loves her anyway, and they're going to do whatever. He just wants to be with her. That's fine. I struggled with this episode for one reason, and that was when Steve goes to DJ. I actually fast-forwarded through this because it was too stupid for me. Steve is asking DJ help propose to CJ, and I get the fact that it paid off an entire season of jokes at the CJ character's expense. That Steve really still has his heart set on DJ. And yes, I understand that by having her walk in on them, running through his proposal and thinking he's proposing to her, pays off that entire season's worth of gags. But still, it was too Three's Company for me. It was too forced, situational, and they resolved it quickly enough and funny enough. And I did enjoy Matt walking in on DJ proposing to CJ because Steve couldn't do it for whatever the reasons were. But yeah, that whole bit in the kitchen when she walked in and up to the point where clearly they had resolved it and DJ was proposing to her, I was like, this is unbearable. She want to weigh in here. Am I too sensitive, or were you struggling with that as well?
I sat through it, and that's about as much praise as I can give it.
That was rough, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't really think you were wrong about any of it. Again, getting goofy for the sake of goofy, and trying to throw little nods in there here and there for sight gags was, I mean, it was kind of almost, like you said, we've used the word a couple times, hackneyed, and I don't want to overuse it because it alludes its meaning, but that's really the best way to describe how they threw that together.
Yeah. They made a lot of hash out of the whole Godfather conversation between Jesse, Joey, and Danny, and then went nowhere with it. Did you notice that? Like, I've got something to say to you. I don't like your song. Huh? Like, that's it? That's where, like, I really thought they were going to address some sort of tension between the three men, and then it just went nowhere. It just seemed to be a gag.
Yeah, I don't know if that was whose decision that was. First of all, everybody likes the song Forever, so that was a terrible joke in and of itself. Second of all, there's a chance, okay, we had some involvement from the main characters of the original series, then we cooled off. Now we brought them back. We might give them something to do here. No, it's just going to be, they're here for window dressing. We gave them a little something just to bring people to see them, and there's nothing actually of note here.
Yeah. But we finally have the big season reveal that DJ wanted to be with Steve at the onset of season 2, but she missed her window of opportunity, and that even though she wanted to be with Steve, she realizes she's happy with Matt. And that's how the season ends as we prepare for season 3. One thing I have to say before we close out is the mugging to the camera from John Stamos as they once again tacitly acknowledge that the Olsen twins have opted to not be a part of the show, not even in a brief appearance. And John Stamos very funnily looks at the camera and says, "Come on, it'll be fun." I had a big laugh at that.
Yeah, that was
Thanksgiving episode. I thought that was very amusing.
Yeah, that was good, and I know that in real life, Stamos has had the closest relationship with the Olsens, and stayed in touch with them for a very long time regularly, and would hang out with them at Disney World, which is like all of their favorite places. So if they're doing that to try to reach out to them, it's kind of like the last gasp effort, I guess, to say, John, maybe you could be the one to convince them. But at this point, I don't think any of us are holding our breath to see the Olsen twins reprise the role of Michelle, and we're probably looking at a recasting this year if there's nothing that can be worked out.
If they can find a look-alike for Ashton Kutcher, I'm sure there's somebody out there that looks like one of the Olsen twins. And why not?
Well, they asked Elizabeth Olsen, but I guess she's too busy being the Scarlet Witch and doing other things.
Mm-hmm. Listen, maybe after they're shooting the Avengers now. I'm sure, if she was interested, then they can get her to do it, and her sisters won't disown her if she does. Go in there and shoot an episode. I mean, how long could it take to film one 22-minute episode in between Avengers projects or whatever the hell else she's working on? So get in there, be Michelle for an episode. I mean, I'm not asking any of the Olsen twins to make a whole season commitment, but why not get in there? Do an episode like they do with Joey or Jesse or somebody, and then get out again. Make the fans happy. Get yourself a paycheck, and let's move on with our lives. It's one of those where I don't understand where the Olsens are coming from, and at least not doing an episode at this point. I mean, maybe the first season they were like, well, let's see how this plays out. This may suck, something awful, and we don't want our names attached to it. But I mean, at this point, is the Olsen brand even that valuable? They're so old now that I don't think they're even selling to. I don't think they're selling movies to kids anymore. I mean, am I wrong about that?
They're not. The one thing I know, and they made the allusion to in season 1, is that one of them, I don't know if it's Mary-Kate or if it's Asher, maybe it's both of them. I'm wrong, but they're doing a fashion line of some kind, which it goes even further to the point where I don't understand how that would hurt them in the least to make a guest spot. I know that I want to say it's Mary-Kate. Mary-Kate's retired from acting. But at the same time, this is why you guys are famous in the first place. This is, the show that launched you. I understand you did other stuff, but without Full House, are there, the uber successful Mary-Kate and Ashley video series of movies, and they tried 2 other shows after Full House ended, and guess what? Neither of them lasted beyond a season or 2. So it's pretty clear what people wanted from the Olsen twins, and that was Michelle Tanner or, safe movie that you could rent for a girl's sleepover or something for, elementary school age girls. If anything, I don't see how this wouldn't help their brand by getting their name out there more, getting the people who love them to begin with to see them in the role they love them in to start with. Maybe bring some attention to their fashion line by wearing some of the clothes in. I don't know. I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like money is an issue, to my knowledge. They weren't really getting many acting jobs after, 2002 anyway. I don't get it.
No, I mean, and look, they have a very successful fashion line. I mean, I'm just looking at their Wikipedia pages. Right now I'm on the one just from Mary-Kate Olsen. And as of last year, she was nominated by the Council of Fashion Designers of America for Accessories Designer of the Year and Women's Wear Designer of the Year. She actually won in 2015 Women's Designer of the Year. So that's fine. And she looks like she had a television role in 2008 in something called Samantha Who. And she was in an episode of Weeds. Or rather, she was a recurring character in season 3 on Weeds, and that was 2007. And it looks like the last two things she did, films. In 2011, she was in something called Beastly, and then a documentary.
Oh, that was. That Beastly was a really bad modern day take on Beauty and the Beast set in a Manhattan high school. That was universally panned.
And she was in some sort of documentary. 2013, Scatter My Ashes at Bergdorf's. I have no idea what that's about. But as a pair, their last thing they did together was New York Minute in 2004. So again, I'm not saying like they need the gig. Clearly, as fashion moguls, they're doing just fine. Which again, I go back to, in what way does any of this hurt your brand to just show up, shoot an episode, and, come in, I would say even talk to Stamos about saying, look, why don't I dress everybody in this episode, in our stuff? This episode brought to you by whatever the hell the name of their fashion company is, and and everyone wears something that they've created, or if their line is created, and come in, do an episode, and leave again. I don't. We were probably talking about this longer than anybody involved in the show has, so let's just move on. By the way, the name of the company is called Dual Star. Dual Star. That actually sounds very science fiction-y. All right, the show has been renewed for a 3rd season. Expected to be released sometime in 2017, and they've ordered 18 shows. So the first season was 13 episodes, second season 13 episodes. We're going to get 18 episodes, Pat, next time. I may need to put this on for a whole full 2 hours to review instead of 90 minutes.
let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay. All right. Just to sum up, again, overall, look, comedy is supposed to, as I say to Robert Winfrey all the time, comedy is supposed to make you laugh. I only had to fast forward a few times, as I said before, but overall, I thought the show was funny. I find the characters to be very personable, very enjoyable. Certainly a few of them are quite lookers. They are certainly nice to look at. I'm excited for season 3 to see where they go and what they come up with. And I'm very excited because I decided to keep the Matt character on because I really liked him with DJ. And the Jimmy Steffi relationship is also a fun one that I hope they do some more stuff with. So I'll give you the final word here.
Again, I didn't enjoy it as much as the first season, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I thought there was a lot of good here. I think this season had more missed opportunities than season 1, which is probably my main criticism of it. But it did leave the door open for possibilities to have the show get even better as it goes. And I think every show, it's not uncommon to see a sophomore slump here and there. Even in the original series, I felt season 1 was superior to season 2. And now that they're expanding it, 18 episodes, the narrative for the season isn't going to be as crushed in where you have to jam everything into place as you did here. I think there's good opportunity then to have a better balance of stories with, a main cast of something like 8 characters is tough. And then on top of that, all the recurring characters from the original series and recurring ones that they've created for this one. An 18-episode balance seems a little bit more realistic to handle those things in a better way and it's going to challenge them to have to write a little bit more longer term and not rely on going over the goofy line like they did in this one.
Agreed. All right. That's it for TV Party tonight. Tomorrow night on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network is the Metal Hammer of Doom. We'll be reviewing Creator, Gods of Violence. And Thursday, I believe, we are going to be doing another Because So-and-So Made Me, name. I say because name made me. Gavin will be coming on to review The Master, another Paul Thomas Anderson movie. So that'll be fun. The next TV Party, I believe Jesse is coming back on, and we're going to look at Black Mirror Season 2. The next Metal Hammer of Doom, or the next week, we'll be reviewing actually my friend's band from high school. My friend from high school. He has a band called If He Dies. Their album Beneath the Waves is available on Spotify. As a favor, because I'm a nice guy, we're gonna go ahead and review that for them on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then our next on trial is Thursday, February 9th. I'll be defending. Sean will be prosecuting Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil. As they wrap up Resident Evil in the movies, we'll be putting the original Resident Evil on trial. Pat, and let me go ahead and plug this. It's in the archives now. Pat and I did an alternative commentary Saturday night for UFC on Fox 23, Shevchenko versus Pena. We did that live. If you haven't heard it yet and you want to go back and listen to it, I thought we did a fairly good job of capturing all the action there. And most importantly, because I used my phone that night as I'm using tonight, it was audible. There was no sound cutting out.
Except when that happens, folks.
Well, they can't all be winners. Yeah. So other than my lack of lungs, there was no sound cutting out. The lung thing, that's a whole other issue. All right. I'm going to try to get air back in my lungs, so why don't you do your plug, sir?
Okay. As Mark pointed out, we recorded a live commentary during the latest UFC on Fox card. If you like MMA in the least, please listen to it. Let us know your feelings on how we did. I like to think we're much better than John Anik and Brian Stan. Note, I said like to think that. I don't think we actually are, at least in the case of Brian Stan, maybe. But, yeah, we had a great time doing it. If you listened to it, we really hope you enjoyed it. And we always appreciate feedback on things you did like and things you didn't like that we can try to improve on. I'd like to throw a plug out to a good friend of mine, Joey Infante, who I've known for about 15 years. Joey has just started recording and doing his own podcast network. It's got its own website. It's called deathbypodcast.com, and they specialize in two veins. It is the Slice and Dice Dreadcast, which is dedicated to horror movies of all kinds, and the Death by Moonsault podcast, which is, as its name implies, dedicated to wrestling. Joey has a co-host named Jim on it. They are a great duo. Joey's been a friend for a number of years, and I really enjoy his work, so check it out. Other than that, you will not probably hear from me in the near future until we get to rolling when Mark does a When in Rome themed movie series, where tentatively you will hear me and Mark talk about the Bruce Lee classic, The Way of the Dragon or Return of the Dragon, depending on whether you're using the American or Asian title of it. It is the notable film that features the Bruce Lee-Chuck Norris fight.
All right. Thank you for listening tonight. You downloaded it in the archives. Thank you for downloading. Go ahead and give the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page a like. Check out our other shows, if you will. I want to thank Pat for joining me on this TV party tonight. We're going to go out with The Boy Next Door. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Hey, hey.